Some are calling it the worst humanitarian crisis in recent history, with one charity voicing concerns that the civilian population might not last another year. The ongoing conflict in Syria has displaced almost half the population, with over 2 million Syrians who have now left the country since the violence began. Of those 2 million, 96% are estimated to be living in the 5 neighbouring countries of Syria, with almost 1 million in the Lebanon alone. While praising the aid efforts of the European Union, Amnesty International has said that the continent should hang its head in shame for not accepting more Syrian refugees.
What we want is a clear solution. I think it will be an important gesture. We have to acknowledge that Europe has contributed a significant amount of humanitarian aid, but they need to also take refugees.
But the UK government argues that it is already doing all that it can through its backing of relief programmes. Speaking at a press conference with the Islamic Relief Organisation, the Secretary of State for International Development, Justine Greening, highlighted the UK's major role in the effort.
The UK is the second biggest bilateral donor and supporter of the millions of people who've been affected by this crisis. We've given now £600 million to help support those people who've been affected by the Syrian crisis. Probably about half of that has helped neighbouring countries and refugees who've gone out to neighbouring countries, and then about half of it to help people still inside Syria.
At the conference, the Secretary of State announced that Islamic Relief would receive over £2 million for its education programme teaching Syrian children in Jordan. I asked the Director of Islamic Relief if they had been able to operate safely and effectively inside Syria.
Well, we found it extremely challenging working in the conflict zones inside Syria. We're reaching currently over 2 million people. 1 million outside of Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, with organizations such as the United Nations, World Food Programme, UNICEF, that we're implementing on behalf of in the neighbouring countries. But the most difficult of areas is the one that's most in need, which is the 1 million people that we're reaching inside of Syria.
The UNHCR estimates that there are over 6 million people internally displaced within Syria. Earlier this week, the Irish charity Concern said that the Syrian population will not survive another year of trauma and human rights abuses. I put this to Justine Greening at the conference.
Getting any aid to people in Syria is an incredibly dangerous process for the humanitarian agencies who are having to deliver it, and the UN agencies. We've seen, I think, around 40 humanitarian workers killed from the Syrian Red Crescent alone. So it's vital that we are able to see those agencies go about their humanitarian work unfettered and free from violence.
With negotiations still ongoing, the UK will have to consider whether it needs to put more political pressure on the Syrian government or step up its relief efforts. Jahangar Malik had this final message for Islam Channel viewers.
The last 3 years, the viewers of Islam Channel and the British Muslim community have responded generously of over £10 million to Islamic Relief, which has enabled Islamic Relief to launch a £50 million campaign and operation inside Syria. So I'd like to thank the viewers of Islam Channel and the generous British Muslim community in entrusting us to reach the people inside Syria and surrounding Syria in this desperate hour of need.
Nathaniel Amos Sanson, Islam Channel.
Well, joining me in the studio to discuss this appalling situation, Abdulaziz Al-Mashi, Head of Media and Communications at the Syrian Community in the UK, an association of Syrians here in Britain, Dr. Khalid Abdul Hamid Filkri, a Middle East political commentator, and Imran Madden, Head of the Humanitarian Department at Islamic Relief. And joining us by Skype, we have Paul Schulter, Senior Visiting Fellow in the Centre for Defence Studies, King's College, London. Let me ask you, first of all, Imran Madden from Islamic Relief. There has been some suggestion that one of the things that might be coming out of Geneva and Montreux is the idea of local ceasefires to make it easier to bring humanitarian aid in. Do you think that would be a step forward?
Oh, absolutely. I think, at the heart of effective humanitarian aid is access. And if we're able to see the possibility of ceasefires, that gives us a couple of things. That gives us, one, an opportunity to assess the needs of the population. The most effective aid is based on being able to see the beneficiaries directly, to see their condition, to interview them, to make assessments of their overall needs. So if we can get access, we get very good data on the needs. We're able to then develop programs that are tailored to their exact needs. But it also does something very important, and it allows us to reassure our staff that they're secure. Because, as we've seen from the recent report, from the Syrian Red Crescent alone, they've lost 40 of their personnel, and it's very difficult for us as an organisation. We have a humanitarian imperative. We've got a track record of working in the most difficult areas around the world from the very early days of Islamic relief, but we're like a lot of other organisations in that sense. So if we're able to ensure that we've got unfettered, unconditional access to areas in the scenario of ceasefires, that helps us enormously, absolutely.
At the moment, do you work through Damascus, as it were, and the UN agencies, or are you doing cross-border stuff from Jordan or Turkey or Lebanon?
Well, we, access through Damascus, through, what would normally be, the normal process of access, speaking to the government, working with the UN, the normal humanitarian corridors are not there. We don't have that kind of access. So, but then due to our humanitarian imperative, our mandate, when we see that we have access, and if it is cross-border activities and supporting local partners and through national staff in Syria, if we can get safe access and we can deliver aid to areas across border and such like, we of course will do that.
But is that what you're doing now? I'm
yes,
trying to find out what you're doing now.
Yes,
you are
absolutely.
doing cross-border.
Yes, absolutely.
Now.
Yeah.
Right. Let me come on back to Paul Schulte on this question of ceasefires. Do you think that is a sort of confidence-building measure politically and also obviously humanitarian benefit, and that is something that might come out of these talks in these last few days?
I think it's something that the UN is pushing very much. I don't think it'll have much of a political confidence-building content to it, though it would be nice to be wrong. But I think that it could save lives, and there will be discussions going on between closed doors, probably led or coordinated by Valerie Amos, the senior UN official responsible for humanitarian affairs, which will be about seeing if there can be local corridors or truces or at least pauses where both sides can agree, and tactically that may be difficult in many places. Each fears the other will gain from it. But in some places, I think there will be new possibilities of sending in food and bringing out people, which are being explored. It won't be huge, it won't be transformative for the whole ugly picture, but it could make literally a life and death difference to some thousands of people.
Well, luckily we actually now have on the telephone Salim Salamah, who's a spokesperson for the Yarmouk refugee camp, which is obviously a Palestinian refugee camp on the southern outskirts of Damascus. Welcome to the program, Salim Salamah. Do you think, now recently there was indeed some kind of local ceasefire, wasn't there, that allowed aid to go into Yarmouk? Is that something that could be developed, do you think?
Yes, good evening, Jonathan and everybody. Actually, just a small correction. I'm the spokesperson of the Palestinian Association for Human Rights, Syria. Actually, yes, we heard recently about a lot of attempts to break the siege and to let some food baskets into the camp. But unfortunately, according to our network of activists and people documenting and following up on daily basis, only so far maximum 150 baskets were allowed in, where more than 20,000 people are trapped, which means that it is only a small drop in a sea of hungry people. We heard a lot about UNRWA trying to break in the siege. We heard a lot about many community-based initiatives trying to reach out, but unfortunately, a lot of them were turned down by the checkpoint of the regime forces at the entrance of the camp.
Now, I believe you have a series of demands or requests that you're trying to put to the UN in Geneva. Can you give us an idea what you actually specifically are calling for?
Definitely. Actually, we're preparing a small statement signed by many activists and Palestinians and Syrian activists all over the world, and we were calling since many days, and now it will be presented to the negotiations. We will try to present it to the negotiations in Geneva, calling for an urgent and immediate lifting of siege from Yarmouk, and that the Syrian regime should be compelled to stop persecuting the Palestinian non-violent activists who are actually trying to do the relief work inside the camp. and trying to outreach the hungry families. Plus the fact that we might witness in the coming future a lot of change in the Syrian laws towards the Palestinians, and this is something that is worrying us a lot as Palestinian Association for Human Rights. So we would call the Syrian government to keep the laws which always applied on Palestinian refugees. In fact, demands like stopping the shelling and not using the use of heavy weapons inside the camp is taken for granted. But we are feeling really desperate and sad to see that day after day the shelling is becoming more and the situation is getting worse and worse.
I wonder if we could just go back to the fact that you did say some relief went in. What was the mechanism by how that happened? I mean, how come suddenly that was allowed in? Was it pressure, political pressure? What was the thing that made the difference suddenly?
Talking about the 150 basket of food.
Yes.
Yes. In fact, I guess we managed to successfully deliver the story to many top news sources, and the pressure was very, very huge on social media and both on the ground and all over the world. I guess that put the Syrian government in a very embarrassing situation because photos of starvation were leaked out, and as a Palestinian Association, we issued 15 pages report about the situation inside the camp, where we documented by name and date and cause of death 58 deaths because of starvation, and 14 because of lack of medical supplies, and 2 because of lack of heating materials. And I guess this report was quoted by the CNN and referred to in many other international organizations' statements. I guess it was a reason for putting things into an urgent context, and this all goes back to our huge network of brave and active monitors and activists trying.
All right, thank you for that. Abdulaziz, I mean, do you think this, we've had one good example where there was some kind of pressure and then local ceasefire and then aid came in. Do you think that could be copied throughout the country, or at least in some other parts of the country, become a model?
Well, to be honest, it is again the international community. The life conditions in Al Yarmouk camp and other besieged area are drastically deteriorating, and the UNRWA said only in Al Yarmouk since last September 15 people have lost their life due to hunger, and they said we were unable to access Al Yarmouk camp since last September, and they said if no action to be taken to handle these conditions, then it will be late to save thousands of lives. And I mean, it is death is death. If to die by a chemical weapon, or to die hungry, or to die by a bullet. When the international community decided to take action against the regime to disarm him from his chemical weapon, they were successful. Why the international community don't move now to break the siege? Now we are talking about 1.6 million people who are living under the siege. People don't have anything at all.
Well, let me come on to that with you, Dr. Khalid. I mean, you talk about 1.6 million people under siege, but some of those people under siege are government-held areas who are besieged by the rebels, for example, Western Aleppo. Is that not the case, that both sides are using starvation and siege as a political or military even weapon?
No, really, we cannot equalize between the victim and the killer. And really, I think that there is an international conspiracy against our people in Syria. The matter here, as my brother said now, if the international community wants and have the real will to add and help and support, they will. They can make a huge pressure on this barbaric regime of the Syrian government. They can stop and ban the flying of his planes. They can do a lot, but they don't want. And and then we go to blame the people, and we go to blame the rebels. We go to blame really, it is the government. It is the regime.
Well, do you not accept that the rebels have done some terrible things? I mean, many international reports have said they're credible accounts of atrocities, massacres figures by the rebels. May not be on the same
but this
scale
cannot be compared.
as the government. Do you
Yes.
not accept that something's been going on?
Something or sometime it may happen, but the criminal and the great crime is from the regime. Now we are talking about killing 200, 300,000. Who to be blamed? We are talking about people moving from their houses homeless. More than 1, 2, 3, 4 millions. The crisis in Syria is unbelievable. You cannot compare it with what happened in Afghanistan or in Somalia or even in Bosnia. I was there in the refugee camps in Afghanistan as a medical doctor. I am a preventive medical doctor. But there was access. As the brother said, there was Pakistan was giving access to the refugees, and it was not so brutal as it happened
there is
here in
access.
Syria.
We've just heard from Imran Madden before that they are able to do cross-border access from Turkey. So it's not true that there is no access. Isn't that the case? Can you tell us a bit about Aleppo, for example? Do you have information?
Well, look, let's go back to this original point about the effective support to those that need it. That can only happen with unfettered access, where we have safe humanitarian corridors. We have nothing like that. That the levels of aid being provided, I want to make this really clear. I mean, very noble efforts by national staff, by people working under incredibly difficult situations. It's making an effect, of course. It's saving lives, absolutely. But it's nothing like the amount of aid that's required. So going back to our mandate, the only way that we can fulfill our mandate in Syria is to have complete access to all areas so that we can access and assess anybody within any region, community who's been affected and provide suitable aid. I really want to make this point, we're nowhere near that. We're absolutely nowhere near that. And that can only happen if we have peace and we have a ceasefire and we're allowed to have completely unfettered access to all those that need assistance.
But what about some people, when they talk about humanitarian corridors, mean something almost military? I think we heard it from our colleague Dr. Khalid Abdul, that there has to be no-fly zones and so on to make it possible to aid come in without it being bombed by the government forces, etc.
I mean, again, if we're going back to really answering that question, what is the situation that will allow Islamic Relief and other aid agencies fulfill their mandates? It's a ceasefire. It's a peaceful settlement. I mean, ultimately, if we're talking about, a 24-hour ceasefire, somebody providing limited access, 150 baskets going into 20,000 people. I mean, this is not a response. I mean, we find it very difficult to celebrate these things. What we're talking about is peace, is a ceasefire, is unfettered, unconditional access by agencies, through Damascus. I mean, nobody wants to work in a clandestine way. Nobody wants to smuggle stuff. But we have a humanitarian mandate. What do? We have to provide assistance. So, but it's balanced against security. Many aid workers have lost their lives. We've got expectations of our donors. We're an agency that has got a very good track record of working in war zones. But ultimately, if you're asking me the question, what is the best way for Islamic Relief to work in Syria? It's through a complete ceasefire, peace, and unfettered. I mean, it's really important because the issue of you can go, but you can only go to a certain area is not an answer to the question.
I'm sorry to cut you off a little bit. We've only got 1 minute left. I just want to get a very quick round from everybody. Paul Schulte, have these talks so far produced more or less than you expected in Geneva?
Too early to tell, but they had to be tried.
Good answer. Abdulaziz, more or less than you expected? It's come out less.
Of course, yes.
Much less.
Well, I think I have to express hope that, things sometimes come at the very last minute and we're always hopeful that, if it's not successful, then there may be future opportunities. But people need to talk and we need peace, we need a ceasefire and we need access.
Okay, well, on that note that we all need hope, and let's hope we'll get some hope, we have to end the programme. So thank you very much indeed, Abdulaziz, Dr. Khalid Hamid, Imran Madden, Paul Schulte, by Skype, and of course Salim Salameh representing the Palestinian refugees in Syria. And thank you, of course, for watching.